Thanks for taking some time out of your day, Cole, and sharing some new information with us. How's your day going so far?
Well, great. And thank you all for having me on. It's a pleasure. I love the podcast title. It's good to see you guys are up to this.
Yeah, you got some new information out, and we really want to dive into it. But gosh, your story seems pretty simple as far as how you got into sport and biking and running.
Mhm.
Obviously, your father's the founder and creator of the Leadville Trail 100. Was first ran in 1983, and so you could just assume, or I guess I assume, and maybe our listeners do as well, that your history of sport came from that, from growing up in that environment. I don't think you're all too much older than I am, or we're right around the same age. So I'd imagine that you're a pretty young buck yourself in those first years of Leadville. Um,
Yes.
but but if I'm wrong, correct me. Am I just assuming that you got into it because of your interactions with Leadville and growing up in the family,
Oh,
or is
absolutely.
a little different trajectory?
Absolutely. I got into it growing up with my family. When I was 2 years old, my dad moved us to Leadville, and he'd really just fallen in love with the burro race, Leadville's iconic heritage sport. And during that time, he was also trying to get me active in running, and he'd have me doing all the local 5Ks and stuff. And yeah, then in high school, it really blossomed with another awesome guy that was like my dad, and that was Frank Minson, my coach. I also had other great coaches such as Gary Hanks and stuff, but Frank really taught us how to be champions, and it was really something to be able to be a part of that program. And so, my dad combined with that energy of Frank really took on a life of running with him.
That's
And
great. Thanks for sharing that with us, Cole.
yeah, and then the biking didn't start until college actually. So
Hmm.
I guess I didn't get into biking until I realized I wasn't going to make all the scholarships I thought I was in collegiate running. So that's when I transitioned.
So was the biking just an alternative to stay healthy, or was that a reach for you to get some scholarships as well?
Oh boy, no. So there weren't any real programs at that time.
Hmm.
But what it was is I just never thought I was going to be able to do the Leadville Trail 100 run. Also, at that same time, I was turning 21. And when my scholarships went out the door, I thought, oh boy, now's my chance. I'm going to go do Leadville. But I was trained as a collegiate cross country runner. And when that gun went off, I ran like one. And by the time we hit the lake, I think I was probably done. And, it was a real struggle all the way to Winfield. Somehow we got there. The year I chose to do it, it rained for the first 12 hours of the race.
Oof.
And I got to Winfield and I quit running for 16 years. So that's actually when I went to biking.
That's a great story. How many? So let's back up a second. How many 100 run finishes do you have, Cole?
I have four. They
Oh,
all came
excellent.
in
And I know you're over 10. You're over 10, or you're at 10 on the bike.
At 10, I did have like my first year, I did a 12:06 because I was fresh off that DNF from the run. Thought I'd train the same and get a different result. And so I put my wheel up that red carpet at 12 hours and 6 minutes. So
Ooh,
I went
yeah,
down as a
yeah.
DNF that year.
Awesome, awesome. That's great. And
So
I'm
yeah, I had to
sure.
redeem myself on both ventures. I returned back to biking 8 years after that and running, as I said before, 16 years after. And at that time, I had the maturity. I had my own why instead of like trying to do it for my dad or just because it was something to do. And yeah, finding the finish line wasn't very hard after that.
That's great. I appreciate you sharing those stories. So, speaking of stories, you just came out with a whole bunch of new tales in a paper form called "Grits, Guts, and Determination." My tale of a cowboy, 100 miles of dirt, and a town so magical they had to save it. It's a brand new publication. I believe it came out just this week. Can you tell us about it and how long it took you to write it?
Oh, absolutely. So, yes, it's the story of my father. as it's no secret, we've been covered in numerous publications. He's been mentioned in numerous articles, what have you, print media, video, movies, TV. But nobody's really ever told his story. And I think it was about the time Running with Sherman came out from Christopher McDougall. Boy, it just
Mm-hmm.
took me down a memory lane reading that book and my dad's history with that sport and a little bit of my own. And, I thought, man, it's really, really time for that story to be out there. But actually, we all kind of started approaching Chris to get him to maybe tell it. And Chris was very honored, but he just said, bios just kind of aren't something I get into. I need a little more freedom. And at the same time, I was coming off of other artistic endeavors, and I thought, well, maybe it's time for me to try it. I don't think it's going to get done if maybe I don't try it. And so, I talked to my dad and Mary Lee about it, and a few other people for sure, and just decided I was going to try to start. And this was in 19, I guess, like August in 19 probably. And boy, it just flowed right out of me pretty good. Memory lane was alive. Everything was coming to me. We were making a lot of progress. I think I wrote 80,000 words in 3 months.
Oof.
And then after that, I learned that I was probably just barely at Turquoise Lake outbound in terms of the race. And so I kind of had a little different vision at first. I was going to have a little bit more history of Leadville itself in there. Actually kind of had hired another author to possibly work with me and tell that side, who was much more versed in that. And it became apparent pretty quick, but we didn't address it soon enough, that no, these should be two separate books. And I came up with just probably too much content, definitely had to edit out. And the vision this other person had just was a lot more of the history and a lot less of Ken. And my whole goal for this book is to tell my father's story. And so we decided it best to part, but that was after 3 years. Then I just kind of, I had a new fiance and everything and came running out to California. She had a better opportunity out here. And we got out here, and that just burned the bridge down right away, and we parted company. And, I'm still enjoying California, but I kind of lost a lot of energy and focus with that. I kind of needed a little clearing in my own head, chasing some new dragons myself. So separated from the race series and kind of just was starting to lose a little bit of hope that it was going to matriculate into the public. And so I'd been here for a good little bit, caught up with my buddy Bill Stahl, who had edited a lot of the late David Clark's books, good friend of mine and yours as well. And so got to talking to him, and he pulled me back on track. And we took the project to him. He edited it very well, and here we are today.
Wow, that's quite the process. I guess I'll back up to Christopher McDougall, because I believe he wrote the preface for the book itself, right? I believe he wrote like the introduction to it.
Yes, he
Because
did.
I'm on chapter 1. I shared with you offline that I'm halfway through chapter 1.
Absolutely. Thank you for getting that far, Brian. Christopher's always been very supportive and just a great friend of the family. When he wouldn't write it, and I said I was going to do it, I couldn't see anybody else to do the Ford, so just worked on him as much as I could. He was very good. It gave me very good direction along the way, and really great advice that also kept me on the rails.
Well, interesting enough, I found Leadville through Christopher McDougall's book, Born to Run. He's also got Running with Sherman out,
Uh,
but Born to Run was, it had a lot of folklore history of ultra running itself and the Tarahumara Indians, but it did have a couple chapters regarding Ken and the race series and Leadville and when the Tarahumara showed up. There was a whole tie and a connection to Leadville in the 2009 printing of Born to Run, and that's my connection to it. I read the book and was instantly hooked. I thought, well, shoot, Leadville's just up the road. I could go try my luck there. It's pretty close to home, and I've never left. I've never looked back. So I appreciate his writing, and I thought there was a great connection there myself as well, with the preface to the book.
well, yeah, we're one and the same there, Brian. I mean, it was my reading it in early 2010 that put me back on the line in 2011. So is absolutely the same for me as well.
Cole, I wanted to dive a little bit into the book itself without spilling the beans or, giving the whole secrets away. But even Christopher McDougall in the preface says that there's stories he didn't know about Ken that you put in there. So I'm trying to rip through it as fast as I can. Again, I've only had it for a day and a half, and I'm already halfway through chapter 1, and just trying to hear those tales because it's
Well,
such an interesting story. It's such a great connection. It's such a well-versed history of Leadville itself. But maybe you could share just a little tidbit with us. Just maybe give us a little taste of something maybe that's in there that we could look forward to.
well, sure, yeah. I mean, I mentioned, and you all have seen my dad and all these other stories, but there's some fun parts really diving into his childhood. You know, I really cover where he came from, and a lot of people don't know it, but it's straight out of Shawnee, Oklahoma, and it's just he was definitely a rough and ornery kid as much as he is a rough and ornery cowboy today. But it has a lot of those stories, such as the fact that he always kept me so guarded or was so careful with me around vehicles and stuff. But he took his paper route money, snuck out behind his parents, bought a motorized like moped scooter, and like rented into a car on the way home and totaled it and gave his parents a bill for the car. So there's a lot of stuff like that, but more so like even the way he began running. I mean, as I told you just a little bit earlier, it was he had moved to Leadville in 76, and we lived just a couple miles over Capitol Hill from the local library. And he had to go there for some reason and walked over there and was kind of jogging back and was a little bit more round than he is today and was very winded. And kind of as he crested Capitol Hill on the way back over, wouldn't you know it, that burro race had gone off. And he was kind of ashamed at himself for not being in shape enough to even get up the little hill, but then more so just really drawn into what the heck were these guys doing with these four-legged beasts running down the avenue. And he's always talked about wanting to be somebody, and he's definitely done that. But that burro racing just embodies that somebody's character of our hard rock miner turned rock star when they take that burro race. So, there's a whole part about that there and his introduction into running and even some of his experiences at some earlier runs that weren't ours. So, yeah, there's some good little nuggets in there all throughout the book. And then, Megan had this daughter, Mary Lee, and God rest her soul, she passed in her sleep much too early. And I lost my sister when that happened. But there's a whole lot of good, as I started getting into this book, you remember how much part she played in that. And our, little pop up stores before, like that was kind of a thing. And it was Megan and I manning those and, behind the scenes with all the work. And so there's really, it'll make you laugh, it'll make you cry, but it'll really humanize Ken and Mary Lee a whole lot more than what's been done. And Mary Lee also, God, she had quite, I mean, over decade history with burro running herself. I mean, my dad was probably 30, 32 years, and I believe Mary Lee was 12 to 15 years in that sport. So, yeah, a lot of people don't know those kind of facts, and it's fun. It's a good walk down memory lane for me, and should be just a fun, bigger introduction for the person that's been giving them all those hugs at the finish line.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing. And I don't have the book yet, but I'll definitely get a copy of it because I think it's really interesting. And I know as someone who makes movie, I'm never really asked like why I make a movie, and I'm really curious, like, what's your goal writing this book? Like, what do you want to achieve with this?
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. My goal is very simple. I want my dad's story to be out, and I want it to be out while he's able to enjoy it. Like I said before, I think this is long overdue for him. It was very humbling to try to take it on, and I just want to spread it as far as I can to spread all that he's done.
So basically, sharing the story of the men behind the Leadville, but everything behind that. So the focus is not only on the Leadville race series, but also the man that your father is, the incredible person that
Absolutely.
he is, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, I think that's fantastic. I wish I had the talent to write something about my dad or my parents. You know, they're people that are very important to you as an individual, and to help people discover them and discover these stories is something that's fantastic. And having this very humane side of it, because I'm Brian is very connected to Leadville. I'm much less so. I've only done it 3 times. I'm only there every year, but it's only been a few years, and they're I mean, and you included it's like kind of a mystical thing, you know. It's unreal a little bit. You get your hug from Mary Lee, you make a little bit of a joke with Ken, and then that's it. But they're almost not real people. Like they're the person at the end of the race. They're the person that have created the event, but it's so far back to think all of the challenges and the hurdle that they had to go through. I think that's going to be a very interesting book. So thanks for
Well,
sharing that.
and yeah, Simon, I think you could probably write very well if you tried. You are an amazing content creator. You're just so full of life. And yeah, all my history at the race, you're one finish behind me. And I have a feeling you're going to pass out pretty fast. um, yeah.
Yeah, knock on wood, you know, knock on wood. And for people on the audio, I'm knocking on my head. Yeah, but it's it's true in terms of number of finish, but I can also somewhat assume that. So one question I had for you, Cole, is yes, I have 3 finish and I'm just one behind, but I feel that Leadville as a race series probably played a big role, in the community of the race played a big role in your childhood and growing up. I'm curious how much your dad was talking about these things when you were growing up, and how much did you realize that was a big deal? Because I feel when your parents are doing something, at least for me, when I was a kid, my dad, well, when you're very young, that's one thing, but when you're a teenager, my dad is stupid. My dad doesn't know anything. My dad just, you kind of rebel against it. And I'm curious if you had that kind of like, oh, it's just a tiny race that he's doing. Like, I don't really care about that. So I'm curious the role that it played when you were growing up.
Oh, yeah. No, your description's pretty spot on. I'll start there. I was 8 years old. Um, the biggest thing I remember those times was him losing his job at that mine, and just it wasn't, like I say, like he says, it was the whole dang town, 3,200 and some odd miners, and I really remember the kids being pretty somber. Some kids giving their allowances back to their parents, and I really remember just being terrified of what are we going to do? And, all your friends would be there one day. The next day, they're off to Henderson, Nevada. And heck, I didn't know where Henderson, Nevada was. For all I knew, they were abducted and drug out of
Yeah.
there. And so that was very sobering. And, I just kept wondering, how are we going to stay? And I, still barely understanding. And my dad was, very serious and focused during that time, but he ran for office. He ran for state representative so he could keep our family there and then start the race also, with the two kind of going hand in hand to keep Leadville there. And so I really remember probably more about those times campaigning during that era, kind of like really Megan and I would be drug out of bed and taken down to Salida, Grand Junction, Buena Vista, and we'd be sent door to door with them, knocking on the door, handing out cards, whatever we could. We knew Dad needed that job. Mary Lee, she wouldn't have any business with the travel agency. She's out there with us too, and that's what I really remember. I remember bits and pieces of them creating the race, but I remember a lot of those conversations with either the burro race and or when my dad was visiting with other entities. At the time, he was actually a state commissioner. I'm sorry, I need to digress just a little. The last couple of years, the mine was still going strong. My dad was in such a place. He was never a politician. In fact, he's always the black sheep of the working world at best. But life was just so good. He ran for county commissioner to kind of give back. And I'm not sure how much I even touch about that exact piece in the book, but then I touch a lot about running for state representative. But that was quite a bigger challenge. He had the biggest district, and he was against a 12-year incumbent rancher. And so, here my cowboy dad comes try to take this other rancher's job. He's a 12-year incumbent. It didn't look good. In fact, I remember going to bed in tears the night of the election. We were so far behind in the polls. And when I woke up, all that had changed. But that's more what I remember when the actual race was being created. The race itself, I more remember being around a lot of burro runners, a couple new runners, and that was kind of it for me.
And obviously, you grew up there, and you're not there anymore. And I'm curious. I mean, Leadville has obviously changed a lot, and I'm curious also to hear your perspective on that.
Well, yes. The Leadville's always been that hard mining culture. It was founded by the Mexicans and the Irish for mining. They were the miners that took that up in town. And so it's always had a lot of grit. It was a little too high, a little too rough to be the state capital, though it was in the running at one time. I think at one time in Leadville, bars outnumbered churches 10-2. So it was really a gritty place, but it was a grit that we all knew, a grit kind of like the burro racing. It just all had that same feel, and we all loved the same types of fun. And the community back then, the mine paid 86% of our property tax, up to 86%. And when it was humming, but it was always a little tougher cloth. Today, after we've done, and the mine today, which this is very important as well. My dad always felt like it would return. Well, it did. Climax came back, but today the mine does the work with 315-ish men that they did with over 300 or 3,000 back in the day. And that's because of technology. And then they've also moved to more of a strip type mining in the open pit than, being down in the pit. And also with that, it's been deemed finite. I mean, it now has a shelf life. And fortunately, I guess what I've really seen from the race itself, we've done these economic studies from, I think the first one was in 2012 and the last one might have been in 2019, or it was maybe a little before, but around there. It shows that this race, that you all viewing this podcast are bringing $20 million into our community annually. 10 of that is direct with your hotel stays, meals, what have you, grocery store. And 10 of that's indirect, second home, second vacation, skiing out here because of the race. So it really has become this other boom for us that is, when I saw that on paper, then it's like, yeah, boy, Dad really deserves a lot more accolades than I've been giving him. I didn't realize it had that kind of significance. The town, I think still brings close to 60 to 80 million to the community. So that's going to be rough when they leave. But the thing about the town itself today, you see a lot more of our athlete types in there that have made Leadville their home. You see them kicking off businesses or being able to run their businesses or work remotely from there more and more. A lot of times, I guess you see that in transition, like my buddy Bill Doc Winmark, a Minnesota cyclist up there near Excelsior, Minnesota. Actually, I think is in Victoria. Yeah, he's in Leadville half time now, and bought a house, slowly started the migration, or cut off King and Queen. Sandy and Mike Dunoff, or Monahan and Mick and Sharon Dunoff, they all come out and kind of keep staying in the same places and bringing new faces, and that in turn brings their friends that used to say vacation in Summit County over to Leadville, and they start growing into a rhythm. So that's really neat, but it's really neat to see all the athletes in the community today. They're driving businesses and supporting businesses that are going to make us all thrive and survive together. When Sterling told us he was leaving his county water job to do the Cloud City Wheelers, I thought he was nuts. And now we're pretty convinced that his vision is the way forward for Leadville in other ways. He's brought the bike tracks, the trails behind the college, a lot of work with the skate track, just a lot of real good things. And you're seeing more and more of that. Or even how, this is an old story now, but I knew it when it was new, Ty and Roxanne Hall. They were freshly married out of college. Roxanne returned to kind of be a teacher in the community and stuff. And Ty and her just hung out and were so passionate with Ski Cooper and hung out at the rec center, Nordic Center, so much that the guy kind of just donated it to him. And they turned that part of the ski area around. They brought us the hut systems and the yurts right out there where you can sleep by the restaurant. And, that's been amazing. You've got Brian at Cycles of Life. He was also another Minnesota guy. Or, the art gallery, same thing, another Minnesota turned Leadville story. And, Brian's got a lot of other projects and investments in town. He's done so well that, our only kind of bike avenue before Brian's shop was Bill Sports, which Paul Copper ran for decades. And, Paul still runs that little business right at the north edge of town, ski rental stuff, but just doesn't have the time or want to do all that it took to run that other part of the business. And so I think we're just going to see that grow and grow. And I think you're going to see the parts of Leadville that you all enjoy and take advantage of grow as well. More trails, more thought behind the recreation there. And yeah, it couldn't be a better situation or place for those activities to occur. You asked my goal with the book, Brian. My dad's goal with the race was singular, bring in dollars to keep ourselves afloat and share our community with anybody we could, show them the best time they ever had, and make them return, make them make Leadville home. So yeah, it's been a heck of a journey, and it's really neat to see town today.
It's those are wonderful stories, Cole. And I think I think it's hard sometimes for outsiders to get that feel for Leadville if you haven't been there. But just listening to you share those, like the way the locals and the people that have migrated there and built businesses and created culture inside of Leadville, with bike shops and different projects, the halls and all that kind of all those people that you speak so highly of. It really still feels like a small town when you explain it to us that way. And I think, I mean, even where I live in Western Colorado. It's a bigger town than Leadville.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I think we're losing a little bit of that flavor. I'm obvious. I could only imagine. I shouldn't assume, but I could only imagine that Simon's area in San Diego seems pretty populated and maybe doesn't have that feel as well. But I don't know for a fact. But I think that your stories really still bring that community, that small town feel to the world. It's almost lacking in a lot of other places in America. And so I feel that. I just listening to you talk about it.
Well, thank you. Yes, and I mean, you bring up a very good point, and there's actually something I left out about the book as well, and that's, I do think there's going to be change both with Leadville and obviously the race, right? Like, we have grown, and it is running like a well-oiled machine. But now also the reason for that is Brahmacratian lifetime. And so, it got too big for Dad and Mary Lee. I mean, that's kind of figuratively. Of course, they could have taken on the work. They did it for decades. They could have managed. But to keep the lift we had kind of after everything, after Born to Run, after Lance, after all the things, it was clear it was going to take more to really keep it aloft. And that's kind of also a part of what was really good about the book too. And it just happened to be kind of just good transition with it. Getting to introduce Bahram. He's always been pretty much like a brother to my dad. I mean, my dad is this 6'2" cowboy out of Oklahoma. Bahram is a 5'10", 5'11" cowboy out of Persia. And I mean, both men are just incredible. Both are visionaries and really know how to make lives count and make them better. And it's just really cool to have been a part of both under my father and that transition. But, with all that, like I say, you see more people associated with the race, right? Like, the part of the magic, but I wouldn't say it's totally gone, is that, when you had a problem with the race in the past, you called Ken Chlouber. But now, that said, that might bite you in the butt too, because when you got Ken Chlouber on the line, he doesn't agree with you. You got your hands full, and Bahram's going to be a little more passionate with you. So, I mean, there's that. Like, you have more hands in the race because that's what it takes to keep that lift. Well, in Leadville, you've got to see a little more growth than it currently has. Not much, and I don't think we're really going to lose that charm for any time soon. But you do see it, and it's also needed. And we all miss the past and what it was really like when there was 45 people out on that line. But on the other hand, boy, today it's so cool to give that many more hugs. Yeah.
Yeah, and just by time from my first race in 2010, there's been a lot of changes. I received one of the last older buckles, maybe not an original one, but one of the older ones with the old 100, the old school 100 3D numbering on top of a rock. And then the following year in 2011, 2012, started coming out with the Lifetime logos on it, which is fine. They're still buckles nonetheless.
Right.
But I was happy to get one last little sliver of the history of old school buckles. And it has changed. It has grown. Lifetime has come in. They've made a lot of changes. Simon and I just recorded recently with Tamara Jen Link, the current race director. She's been around for a couple years. So we got some information about course changes to this year's run and what that looks like for our listeners. So we'll be sharing that shortly as well, prior to the event coming up. It's a well-oiled machine right now. There are a lot of hands in it. We all have our people that we go to and connect with to get our answers. And it's not your dad.
Right, for sure. Well, yeah, and you mentioned another good one. Tamara's another one of those stories, right? She came into town kind of inspired by these races and the culture and everything. And boy, she has really bridged a lot of gaps in a short time with all the hard work she's done there. And she's dove headfirst into other community organizations that just really have that need. And she's kind of like the kind of growth I'm talking about. So yeah, it gets bigger. She bought all this land on the edge of town and she's expanded with that. That's what it's going to be and what we need.
That's great. What a great community up there. Cole, you obviously got a lot of history with Leadville. The book just came out, but and we talked about your dad. The book's about your dad. But let's take a step back and talk about yourself. The last couple of years, what have you been up to? What's your path currently? Are you training? Are you racing? Are you riding your bike? Are you getting out and running? What's going on with you these days, Cole?
Well, so hey, I mean, I did separate from Lifetime. It just as I said, when I came running out here with that new fiance, it was a good start for me. I mean, I guess I'd been with Quest Communications 10 years before Lifetime, and I was with Lifetime just a couple months shy of 13 years. And I was getting really antsy in the Cube Farm in Minnesota when I was working there. But they were always real good to me. When I came to Colorado, we'd kind of gone more to the work from home model, and I'm a huge people person, and that really kind of affected me. I kind of felt like I needed to get back out in the public, and then just wanted to shake it up. So when we came out here and after I split up with my ex, got into selling Chevys. So another part of me is like my dad was we were always a Corvette family, I guess from age 20 till, not all that long ago, my dad always was driving a Corvette, not a Silverado. And, I kind of ended up without a job and not thinking all that through. And I thought, well, heck, I think maybe I'll just go try to sell cars to pass the time. And Dad being a Corvette guy, I just thought, well, I'm going to start with Chevy. And so I went into Folsom Chevy and applied for a job. And, I was going to keep looking for something else, but I've had kind of good success with it and it's been a lot of fun. So I'm doing that right now. Now, one thing it does take to sell cars is time. So my extracurricular time has shrank a ton. I am not training for anything. I am running more like, 2 to 6 miles kind of more regularly and up to like 12 miles to keep a bit of fitness for myself. And then when I can get out, I try to make it up to Tahoe and, Donner Pass area, stuff like that. There's some closer places I've found, like Salmon Falls, where I'm getting out on my bike or on foot on the trail. And it's been really great because I've kind of been robbed of that time. It's taught me the value of that again. And I was pretty, while I am never going to be burnt out on watching all of you finish these races, I was pretty burnt out on that run. And then after it doesn't mean I don't have a passion for it. Just it's not for me to take the steps right now, if you catch my drift. And with the bike, it was kind of that same way. It was kind of, the 10th finish was kind of eluding me. And so, like, when I got it through that much chaos, yeah, taking a break was great. But now I crave it all the time. I go running up the hill whenever I get my days off and go experience, what life was like back in Colorado. And it makes me much more appreciative, and it's a little easier on me to enjoy it. And then I do probably plan on working my way a little more north of where I am. I never got the chance to do Lifetime's Tahoe race at North Star with the bike, and that actually really appeals to me. I'm going to try to make it up there for that. Some of the shorter stuff on the Western course on the running side, I think is intriguing to me for sure. So those are my goals to work toward right now, I think. Yeah.
That sounds great, Cole. We're really happy for you and all that you've achieved, and in sport and outside of sport, and just staying active and moving. It sounds like you're having a great time doing it. It seems less stressful than the racing calendar that maybe Simon and I try to maintain every now and then. But otherwise, yeah, we're really excited for you and all those changes.
Well, yeah, like I say, I'm excited to cheer you guys on to the moon and back, no matter where it's at. And I do think I'll return, right? Like, it's just ebb and flow. But right now, it's just been real peaceful just getting out in nature and really taking it in, realizing what I don't have to take as much for granted when I was doing other jobs. So, yeah. But then again, on the car sales thing too, though, I get to give a lot of hugs in that world too, so it's fine.
It's perfect. That's perfect. Cole, I know you said you'll consider coming back, but I think you'll be back this year for the bike, if I'm not mistaken. Not as a participant, but why don't you go into that for a minute?
Oh yeah, long term, yeah, I will be back to Colorado. It's a question of when. I love California. I always wanted to give it a try. I will be out this year for the bike race. I'll be out at the expo through the whole thing at the Legacy tent with the book, doing signings there with my dad and Mary Lee both. And they will also, just so you know, have the book at most events. I don't think they're going to quite get there in time for the marathon that comes off the back of my bad planning. But yeah, so I'm super excited to make my return this year and get to be on course during the bike race. I'm really bummed I'm not going to be there for the run. That's actually kind of, it's flip a coin. What do you do? And that run's just so important to me. But with the bike, I figured I could kind of hit both crowds. I figured a lot of the runners would be up there, acclimating and getting ready. So I was hoping that was my best advantage with the short amount of days I have to play.
Well, we look forward to it, Cole. Always a pleasure to catch up with you. Always a pleasure to hang out, and I will be up for the bike and being a spectator this year for the bike, and I'll be running. But I do have some athletes that'll be participating in Leadman and the bike and other events up in Leadville this summer, so I'll be up there quite a bit. It'd be great to catch up with you when I do see you at the expo for that bike.
Oh yeah, I would love to catch up. You've got a lot of athletes get through there yourself, so we can have a great time. And I'm still tuning into all of Simon's adventures too. I mean, I can't get enough. So you guys are not only very talented ultra runners, but great content creators as well.
Yeah, I'll be there too for the bike. I'm not biking anymore. I'm retired. I think breaking my ribs twice in 5 months was enough for me. I'm a tough guy, but that was kind of, I draw the line. After my last mountain bike race, which was Leadville, I just cleaned off the blood and I was like, I'm done with this shit. So the bike I have not touched. It's kind of, it's there, it's clean. But I'll be up Columbine on the race, biking race day. So might not see you, but I'll be high-fiving people and filling their bottle. It's for those who have not done the 100-mile mountain bike. I think for me, kind of being up top Columbine was like, I know I can do it now. Like that was the big challenge. Now you just go downhill, it's no problem from there. So
your video of that bike race had a heck of an opening.
Yeah. Yeah, I went Superman.
You literally went Superman.
Yeah.
For those of you that don't know, we'll have to link it into the show notes here so that you can see what they're referencing. But it's a big crash that Simon did in the Leadville 100 mountain bike in 2022 Leadman.
It was a lucky crash, though, right? Like I didn't get seriously injured. Well, I mean, I guess breaking a rib is not fun, but compared to what other people have been through, I feel I was very lucky. Like when I was flying, I felt like that's it. This is over. Like I'm gonna break something severely, and it's just hard to breathe, which is already where I started. It's hard to breathe at altitude. Now it's just a little more painful. It's okay, but yeah.
Well, but that kind of crash can, boy, it leaves a lot of people rattled enough to not get up. And I mean, I don't remember who showed me that video first, but God, I knew. I mean, we're making jokes, but Simon, you've got grit beyond a lot of people. I've crashed my bike a lot less worse and walked the heck away from it and quit. So, I mean, no, that was amazing, and that performance all day, and learning who you are and what that took from you, that was incredible.
Thanks.
Hey Cole, if we're looking for the book and we can't make it up to Leadville for the Bike Expo, where can we find the book? Otherwise, where can we send the 12 listeners that are listening to this? Where can we send those guys?
Well, the 12 of them, maybe one of them will buy the book. They can pick it up on Amazon.com. I've got a paperback, hardcover, and Kindle e-reader there. But I've done it exclusively through Amazon. That was the easiest way for me to conclude this project. So that's who I put all my eggs in the basket with. So go to Amazon.com, pick up your Grit, Guts, and Determination copy. And if you cross my path, I will be honored to sign it.
Cole, any thoughts to the an Audible rendition of it, an audiobook version of it?
I would like to. I haven't started down that road. Actually, that was Bill Stahl's first suggestion. Why don't you think of doing this Audible book first? It's a very brilliant idea. It should be done. It just wasn't baked into my initial plan and timing. I didn't get it off the ground, but yeah, I think that's something to look for in the future. It may be up to a year or so, though. So, if you're really into the story, it's probably better to get it on print or e-reader first.
Excellent. I know Simon and I are pretty. We spent a lot of time on the trail, and so maybe the ebook in our ear would be a good solution for us.
I will try to make that happen.
We appreciate your time. We appreciate your time, Cole. Thanks so much for coming on the show this evening. I look forward to seeing you at Leadville this summer, and take care.
Well, thank you so much. I can't wait for all of our paths to cross again soon.
Thank you. I'm Simon, and that's Brian.
We'd be thrilled to connect with you beyond our show.
For all of your endurance coaching requirement, you can reach out to Coach Brian at altitudeendurancecoaching.com.
To explore more of Simon's content, visit Running with Simon on YouTube.
Don't forget to rate, like, and share our content regularly.
Your support means a lot to us. Thanks.